Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? What a great group of students we have. We have people from California, Texas, Virginia. Looks like all over the United States that are here with us today. We're so glad that you joined us, and a special welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. We're glad that you're here. Remember that you can go back, you can watch these webinars over and over again. Good morning, Caroline Davis. How are you doing? And Rhonda, Tia, Tone, welcome to all of you, and a good morning to all of you. Jorge, welcome to Ellen Silva here for the first time from Massachusetts. Good morning, Fernando. How are you today? And Sandrine in California, Marilena and Vanessa. Oh my goodness, what fantastic students you all are. I was looking at your chat before the webinar began, and some of you have taken the test before. And I want to encourage you to not be discouraged. Remember, the test is worded in a very confusing way. So if you've taken the test before, it has absolutely no correlation with how smart you are or how well you will do in real estate. It's just a very difficult to interpret exam. If you've not watched my webinars before, you'll always notice I have a red suitcase. It's about compartmentalizing, categorizing the information by topic so that you can recall it on the exam. The webinar that I am bringing to you today, I get the great honor of sitting here and tutoring a lot of students every single day from all over the United States. And many of them have not passed the test before. And that's okay. Like I told you, it has no correlation between how smart you are or how well you will do in real estate. So I keep a list because I evaluate their score sheets as to what they are missing most often. And that is how I created this webinar for you today on topics that are missed most often on the exam. So I think you will find this to be extremely helpful. The questions, again, are worded in such a confusing way on the exam that you can know the information and not get the question right because of the way they worded that question. Please make yourself a note that if you have not watched my webinar called Techniques on How to Evaluate Test Questions, that you go in and you take a look at that. I show you how to categorize by topic. I show you how to dissect the question apart, how to go with your first answer and answer it with confidence, and then move on to that next question. I also show you how to find the outline for your exam. We have that available for you on Prep Agent's website on your state-specific page. You can also go to one of the third-party testing centers, whichever one you test through. In California, that's through your DRE. Some of you are Pearson VUE, some PSI. And then in New York, unfortunately, they don't have an outline for you. But that outline, I want you to print so that you know what is on your exam. And in addition to that, you know how many questions are coming from each topic. And I show you step by step in that webinar techniques on how to evaluate test questions, exactly how to go in and how to find your outline. Well, let's go ahead and get started. The first topic we're going to talk about today is property ownership. What I see missed most often in property ownership is ownership and severalty. So remember, ownership and severalty is just ownership by one. There's only one signature. Now, why do students miss this? That sounds easy enough. Because it could be one individual or it could be one business entity. A lot of times when we think of a business entity, we think about a lot of people making up that business entity. And there certainly might be. a lot of people, but it's just one business entity. Or it may be structured that it's just one individual. So be very careful on this question on the exam that you remember that there's just one signature. Ownership and severalty is ownership by one. One of the biggest problem makers on the exam, and maybe you'll agree as well, I'm watching your chat as we go through this webinar, is ownership by two or more. Ownership by two or more, that is going to be tenancy in common and joint tenancy. Tenancy in common is without rights of survivorship, so that means that you can will it to your heirs. Whereas joint tenancy is with rights of survivorship, that means you cannot will your part to your heirs. Upon death of one of the joint tenants, their part immediately goes to the other owners. That is exactly backwards sounding, right? And that's why the students miss this part. Some of you remember my husband is getting his real estate license again. He still has not gone to take the test. He's ready. He just hasn't had time to go take the test. And every time we sit down or we go for a ride in the car, he wants to go over this one more time. And he said, it's just so backwards sounding. And it is. And that's why the students miss it. So remember, tenancy in common without rights of survivorship, that means how you can will it to your heirs, or that means that you can will it to your heirs, I should say. And joint tenancy with rights of survivorship, meaning upon death of one of the owners, their part immediately goes to the other owners. Now, in joint tenancy, you're also going to have 4 unities. You may remember it by the acronym TTIP: time, title, interest, and possession. Think of it like this. We have 4 people who are purchasing a property as joint tenants. They are all in the conference room at the same time. They're all signing the same document. One signs it, hands it to the other, to the other, to the other. They all have an equal 25% ownership in that property, and they all have the right to possess that property. So TTIP has to be there for it to be joint tenancy, all of those unities. Move back over to tenancy in common with me. Of those 4 unities under tenancy in common, the only one you're going to have is possession. Everybody has the right to possess the property. But in tenancy in common, you could acquire the property at different times. You could have different percentages of interest. Maybe we have 2 owners. Maybe one owns 25%. Maybe one owns 75%. So again, of the 4 unities, TTIP under tenancy in common, all we're going to have is possession. These questions on this, they're going to give you a clue. If you understand the part that we just went through and you pull those questions apart, you dissect them apart, you're going to be able to answer that question quite well. Everybody okay with that? I'm checking your chat. Everyone okay? Do you all understand that okay? Yeah. And this is something that's easy to overthink, and we have to be careful not to overthink in order to pass this exam. Keep it very simple, keep it very concise. Yeah. Excellent. It sounds like you're all doing a fantastic job. Fernando, the one that has the unequal shares is going to be tenancy in common. In joint tenancy, it all has to be equal. All right, it looks like you're doing a great job with your learning and you're all okay with this, so we'll move on. Freehold estates, that's another part under property ownership that students many times get confused on. Freehold just means ownership for an indefinite period of time. If you see the word non-freehold or less than freehold, that means a lease agreement. And anytime something is a lease, then it is going to be a personal property interest. So freehold estates, this is actually going to be ownership. I like to bundle terms together. You may have heard me mention that in my other webinars. So I automatically, when I think freehold estates, I think, okay, there's three of them. Fee simple, also called fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible, and life estate. One kind of helps me remember the others, if that makes sense. So the first freehold estate we're going to talk about is fee simple, also called fee simple absolute. This is going to be your very best type of ownership because it has the most bundle of rights. The most bundle of rights. Your bundle of rights include your right to enjoy the property, to will that property to your heirs, to sell it, to lease it, all those rights you have to that property, your bundle of rights. You have the most in fee simple, also called fee simple absolute. Hello, Joanne Santos. She's taken the exam, and in New York, they have to wait 4 to 6 weeks before finding out. So I know you did quite well. You have been a fantastic student. Yes, so be sure and let us know as soon as you hear back. Freehold estate number 2 is called fee simple defeasible. Fee simple defeasible is ownership that comes with a condition. So I gave the church a piece of property. I said, here's my condition. I want you to build an education building. Instead, they decided they would build a parking lot. They did not meet my condition. So that means they have to give me the property back. If they say determinable, that means it's automatically just going to come back to me because that condition was not met. If they say condition subsequent, that means I'm going to get the property back, but I have to instigate getting it back. Whereas in determinable, it automatically just came back to me. Freehold estate number 3 is a life estate. If you want to jot this down, you could have 5 different terms under life estate. Life estate, life tenant, life estate with reversion, remainder man, and life estate pure attribute. Oh, Joanne Santos says she passed. Outstanding. Yes. When I read the other, I thought you were still waiting, but it sounds like you passed. Congratulations to you. That is wonderful news. And thank you for your kind words. You've been an outstanding student. So under life estate is ownership for the duration of somebody's life. I gave my mom a life estate to a property. My mom is called the life tenant. My mom has all the rights of ownership. She can live there. She can enjoy the property. She could sell it. It would be a horrible purchase for a buyer because they would have to surrender it at the end of the life estate. She could lease it out. She could let cousin Joe go live there. But the one thing my mom cannot do, she cannot will it to her heirs. That she's not allowed to do is the life tenant. So my mom passes away, the life estate ends. I'm the original owner. I'm the one who gave my mom the life estate to the property. So if I am the original owner, my mom dies, the life estate ends, it's returned to me, the original owner, it reverts back to me. That's called life estate with reversion. Be very careful not to get reversion and remainder man confused. Remainder man just means last man standing. That's all it means, last man standing. So let's say that my mom dies, the life estate ends, I was the original owner, and let's say that I had passed away and I had willed that property to my sons. Now I said my mom, the life tenant, couldn't will it to anybody, but I, the original owner, could. So my mom passes away, the life estate ends. I, the original owner, had passed away and I had willed it to my sons. My sons are the remainder man. They're the last man standing. So if you'll just remember that remainder man means last man standing, you'll be able to keep reversion and remainder man to where you don't get those two confused on the exam. And life estate pure attribute just means it's based on the life of somebody other than the original life tenant. So let me give you those 5 terms again. So life estate, life tenant, life estate with reversion, remainder man, and life estate puratra v. Those are your 5 terms that go with your third freehold estate, life estate. Oh, Joanne Santos says she was just putting it out to the universe that she's still waiting. Well, we're all going to have positive thoughts that you passed that exam. I know you did very, very well on it. So our freehold estates, again, I'm going to bundle them together. Remember, you have 3 of them. Fee simple, also called fee simple absolute. Fee simple to feasible is the second one. The third one is life estate, and I gave you 5 different terms that go with life estate. Life estate, life tenant, life estate with reversion, remainder man, and life estate puratra v. See how much easier it is if we can bundle those terms together, if we can organize this into a very concise way to learn it and to remember it. Are you all okay on freehold estates? Let me double check your chat. Everybody okay? Joanne, how long ago did you take the test? How many more weeks do you have to wait? New York is the only state that they make them wait. All the other states, they're going to let you know pretty much immediately if you passed. Okay, good. Excellent. I am so glad that this is easy to remember. Okay, let's move into land use controls and regulations and talk about the part that people miss the most. Government rights in land, the public use controls. That's your acronym, Pete. And that stands for police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat. Now, under police power, some of the examples for that are zoning. You know, things can be zoned for different things. Residential, can be zoned for commercial, whatever it might be. Where I see students miss is on variance and non-conforming. So a variance is if something is zoned, let's say for commercial, and you want to go in and build a residential property. You have to ask for a variance. You're asking to go against the rules. You're asking for permission to go against those rules. Whereas non-conforming, that is going to be that something was already built there. It was in compliance with the zoning laws, and after it was built, they went in, they changed the zoning laws, and they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and let you stay because you were here first, and they call that grandfathered in. Exactly, Jorge, exactly. Yes. So I see variance and non-conforming confused regularly. Are you all okay with that? Let me double check your chat and make sure you don't have any questions on that. I think the rest of Pete, everybody does just fine. Eminent domain, the right the government has to take your private property for public use. Remember the action of them doing it, condemnation. Sometimes people get that reversed. Good. Okay, let's move on. Valuation and market analysis. Students miss a lot of these questions, and that's because they're not studying them correctly. Here's how I want you to go about studying this. This is repetitive learning. It's learning about definitions on the valuation and market analysis part and on the finance part. I think about that if I were to go to a foreign country and I needed to speak enough of that language in order to communicate, that's what I need to know about the valuation part and the finance part. I don't have to be fluent because I am not a licensed appraiser. I don't have to be fluent because I'm not a lender, but I have to speak that language enough to communicate to the licensing exam and also to the appraiser, to the lender, whenever they call to tell me about an appraisal or about a buyer and what kind of loan they're approved for. So that way of thinking applies to the valuation and market analysis part and the finance part, which we'll go over after this. I see that market value and market price are confused a lot of the time. Market value is the opinion of what a property will sell for, and they've based that on the property itself, what the real estate market is doing, the supply and the demand. They're comparing it to other properties that are similar that have sold in the last 6 months. So I think about market value. In my mind, I just think about the appraiser. He's coming up with the market value, whereas market price, that's going to be how much is a buyer willing to pay for that property and what is the seller willing to sell that property for. Now, we know in the market that we've been in, and we're seeing the market shift a bit, we're seeing it move. We've seen that buyers have been willing to pay a whole lot of money for houses because we've been in that supply and demand issue, and the sellers have been ecstatic to be paid all that money. We're seeing that start to shift just a little bit again because we're increasing our supply. Our supply and demand is catching itself up. The movement in the interest rates has definitely helped with that. The one thing I can promise you in real estate, it will never stay the same. The market is ever changing all the time. Your job as a licensee, anticipate what it's about to do so you can always be an expert in that. So market value, market price, everybody okay with that? Yeah, Fernando's saying market value is an appraiser and a market price, the seller and the buyer. That's exactly right. That's a great way to remember it. Students get the different approaches mixed up on the valuation part. For just a regular residential type property, I know that when we bought this house 2 years ago that the appraiser used the sales comparison, also called the market data approach. And that's where the appraiser is going in and looking for 3 to 5 like properties that have sold within the last 6 months. They're looking for properties that are in close proximity, usually about a mile radius, about the same size, same number of rooms, same amenities, same upgrades. Now, remember that the property that is being appraised is called your subject property. Maybe my subject property has a swimming pool and I can't find any comparable properties. Your comparable properties are the other properties, the ones they're comparing it to. I can't find any others that have a swimming pool. So an adjustment is going to have to be made. And that adjustment is going to be made on that other property, on the comparable property. The adjustment is never made on your subject property. Yeah. Oh, Tia, that's great. Tia says never change the subject. Yes, perfect. Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to remember it. The cost approach. Cost approach is used for new construction. The cost approach is used for a property that is unique. We can't find any other properties that are anywhere similar. It's used for government properties. Could be a police station, a library, a school. And what they're looking for in the cost approach is how much would it cost to reproduce this property right now? How much would it cost to reproduce it right now? We have 3 types of depreciation in the cost approach. So let's bundle all these together so you can remember them. The first one is called physical deterioration. That's just plain old home maintenance. The house needs painting. The bathtub needs caulking. So physical deterioration, just wear and tear that's normal on a house. Functional obsolescence. There's something about the house that just doesn't function well. It's a 5-bedroom home and it only has 1 bathroom. There's an outdated electrical system. The plumbing is out of date. So something is not functioning well. Economic obsolescence. There is an outside factor out of our control that is lowering the value of the house. They're building a highway right behind the house. Or you may remember the example I told of my friend that I worked at a law firm with, that she had a house, and when she first built it, the Dallas-Fort Worth airport was not all that close to her, but that is a huge airport. They have continued to expand it, and the more they expanded the runway, the closer it got to her house. It was to the point that every time the jets took off all day long, her house rattled and shook. Her ears hurt. I'm sure the foundation of her house had been affected. The value of her house had probably gone to about zero. That is an outstanding example right there of economic obsolescence. It was out of her control. There was nothing she could do. Thank goodness the airport expanded again, and they gave her, or they offered to buy her house and gave her, what the house was worth for that particular property. And she was so happy that happened, because she's like, oh my goodness, my house has gone to being worth nothing. So economic obsolescence, there's something out of your control that has lowered the value of the property. Yes, some of you are asking, can I watch this again? Yes, please do. In 40 minutes, it's hard to retain all of the information. You can go to previous webinars. So you're going to go to your dashboard and choose webinars. Scroll down to previous webinars, type in the title of the webinar. You can also just type in my name, and all of the webinars will appear right there. You'll see that I do the same topics on a regular basis because that's what's on your exam, but always remember to watch the most recent on a topic that I've done. If there's been a law change or rule change, I'll include it in the most recent. Yeah, okay. Heather Dawn says, yeah, it was a bad design. Yes, that could be functional obsolescence, yes. Income approach. This is your third kind of approach. So this is used if someone's buying an income producing property. Now, what I see students get confused on is, remember, you're going to make income from the property itself. It's an apartment building. You're going to make income from renting out the apartments. It is a storage facility, and you're going to make income from renting out the storage units. They're not talking about that you have a property and you're selling clothing in that property, or groceries or whatever it might be, and you're making income from that. They're talking about you're making income from the property itself. Oh, Toy Hamilton, thank you for your kind words. I truly appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now, I want to give you a little bit of homework here. I want you to go in and watch Joe's video called Gross Rent Multiplier. So Gross Rent Multiplier is an outstanding video that he has. He shows you, gives you that visual on how to do a gross rent multiplier question. California, they took your math off of the test. Everybody else is wishing probably for the same, unless you just love math, which some people do. But California, it's possible you could have a couple of things with numbers. So gross rent multiplier being one of them. So California, I would watch gross rent multiplier as well. Oh, that's a great question, Haley. What does it mean, national? Some of you have just one exam, and it is combined with state and national questions that they've mixed in together. And some of you have two exams, and they've divided it into a state exam and a national exam. Yeah, a lot of people don't like the math, I find. Cynthia, my video about analyzing exam questions is called Techniques on How to Evaluate Test Questions. Yeah. Hombick says a golf course will increase property value. It certainly could. Certainly could. In Frisco, Texas, right outside of Dallas, where I live, they're building the PGA golf course. So I think you're exactly right. You're exactly right. That probably upped the values of those properties. Illinois, I'd have to look yours. Illinois, yours is one test, I believe. I believe yours is all mixed into one. I'm 90% sure on that. You can go in and take a look, but I'm pretty sure yours is just one. But you're a PSI tester, so you can go to your outline, your candidate brochure, and it will tell you if it's one test or two. Yeah. Elizabeth, if you can't get the webinars to come up, then just type in my name. Just type in Cynthia at previous webinars, and all the ones that I've done will come up. No, I don't think they're taking math off of Illinois, or I haven't heard that. I think California has been the only one. New York, Joanne Santos, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you have many math questions. You have a little, but not a whole lot. Yeah. All right, so let's bundle those together. We had 3 kinds of approaches that could be used. The first one, the sales market data approach. The second one, the cost approach. The third one, the income approach. Those will be super easy for you to remember. Let's talk about finance and some things that are missed on that. All of the clauses. So we have the acceleration clause. This just means that the borrower defaulted on their loan and it's due now. I think about when I push my foot down on the gas pedal in my car, the accelerator, it makes things go faster. Same thing here. So the lender said, hey, I'm giving you 30 years to pay your loan off, borrower. And the borrower defaulted, and they did not do that. So the lender says, hey, I'm speeding that up. It's due now. I'm no longer giving you 30 years. The alienation clause, that just means that I said goodbye to my house. I sold my house, and the mortgage company says, okay, all the money that is due me, be sure and pay that. And usually in most states, our good buddies at the title company, that will be something that they take care of for us. And it all, of course, will be on the closing disclosure. The assumption clause. This is where the buyer assumes the seller's current loan. The buyer has to qualify just like they're getting a brand new loan. All your government loans, all your FHA, your VA loans are assumable. Some conventional loans are assumable. The benefits of this, you may be assuming a lower interest rate. The closing costs are very low. The defeasance clause, that just means the loan's going to go away when the mortgage is paid in full. The lender's going to file a release when that mortgage is paid in full. The escalation clause, you're going to find this in an ARM, that's an adjustable rate mortgage. This is what allows the interest rate to go up in that adjustable rate mortgage. A subordination clause, that just means that the buyer is getting 2 loans. They could be getting more, but let's say 2. And the subordination clause, that's just where that particular lender has agreed to take a lower position. So if we're getting 2 loans, that's the second loan. The second loan would be the subordinate loan. You'll typically see a higher interest rate because they're second in line. In the event of default, the first one's going to get paid first. So it's an added risk. So that's why you'll see a lot of times the interest rate being higher on the second loan, subordinate loan. And the last one is a prepayment penalty. There are some loans that are just riskier for a lender to do. And so they add a prepayment penalty, a little extra money, because it has been more of a liability to them. It's probably been more time consuming. And if the borrower were to pay the loan off earlier than allowed, there is usually a time period on that. So let's use 3 years, for example, and that's just for example only. They could be structured all kinds of different ways. So if the borrower sells their home, in our example we're using of within 3 years, they have to pay a prepayment penalty. All right, so be careful on all these different clauses. They're really not as difficult as they sound. Let's talk about agency. We have 4 types of listing agreements. This gets confused a whole lot. Yeah, acceleration clause, Fernando, just think about pushing the accelerator down on your car, that makes it speed up. So they're speeding up when that loan is due. Escalation, think about going up on an escalator. So that's what's allowing the interest rate to go up. Maybe that will help. Under agency, I see the 4 types of listing agreements confused. Remember that the open listing, the seller can list with multiple brokers. And if the seller sells the property themselves, they do not have to pay a commission. So on this one, you have to be procuring cause in order to get paid a commission. Exclusive agency and exclusive right to sell are the 2 that get confused the most because they both begin with exclusive. In exclusive agency, the seller can only list with one broker. But if the seller were to sell the property themselves, they do not have to pay a commission. Exclusive right to sell, seller can only list with one broker, but if seller sells the property themselves, they still have to pay a commission no matter what. This one you're going to use the majority of the time. The way I remember it, exclusive right to sell has more words in it than exclusive agency. You have the ability to make more money in exclusive right to sell that had more words because they have to pay a commission. The seller has to pay a commission no matter what. And then your last one was net listing. Some states don't even allow net listings. It's got an ethical problem. We're always supposed to look out for the best interest of our client. In a net listing, it becomes very easy for the agent to look out for their own best interest. I tell the seller my opinion of the market value. Your home is worth $500,000. And the seller says, but I only want to net $50,000. The rest will be your commission. Wow, $450,000 commission. You can see where the problems would start to occur. So make sure you know the different types of listing agreements. Pay close attention to exclusive agency and exclusive right to sell, because those are the two, since they both begin with exclusive, that the agents seems to get confused the most. Our fiduciary obligations to our client, another word for client, principal, old car, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care. So remember that loyalty terminates when agency terminates, and confidentiality goes on forever and ever. Universal, general, and special agency. Universal, the broadest of all. Your seller is going out of the country and they say, I'm not going to have access to a computer. I am going to make you my listing agent. I'm going to give you power of attorney where you can sign on my behalf. Your title will be attorney in fact. General agency, be looking for property manager. You're carrying out the work of the owner of the property in a property manager role. Special agency, the most limited of all. Your buyer representation agreement, your listing agreement. Those create special agency relationships. Property disclosure, lead-based paint. Remember, if the property is built before 1978, it has the potential to have lead-based paint, and the seller must disclose. The seller, it could also be a landlord, does not have to remediate the lead-based paint unless there's an agreement to do so between the seller and the buyer, or the landlord and the tenant. If you are buying a property or leasing a property built before 1978, you have to be given the brochure called Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. A seller has to provide a 10-day period for a home buyer to conduct a paint inspection or risk assessment. For lead-based paint, that can be waived, it can be shortened, it can be lengthened if all parties are in agreement. And then this is what gets missed a whole lot. Remember that this is a federal law about lead-based paint. So HUD, Housing and Urban Development, they can come in up to 3 years after a property closes or a tenant moves into a lease property, and they can audit that broker's office or whomever leased them or sold them that property to make sure all the signed disclosures are there. And what do you owe your customer? I'm going to refer you back to my webinar called Agency. So I have a whole webinar called Agency, and I go into a scenario and I tell you about customer versus client. I think that will answer all your questions. Some things missed on contracts: bilateral and unilateral. Bilateral means 2, unilateral means 1. All the way through the contract, it's a bilateral contract. It's binding 2 parties until we get to the option. In the option, it becomes a unilateral contract because it's just binding 1 party. Students get confused on this because we still have 2 parties there. We still have the buyer and the seller, but it's only binding 1 party. and that is going to be the seller. The buyer is getting to make all the choices. If we're using buyer and seller for an example, do I want to go forward, not go forward with purchasing that property? Now, remember that on these different topics where I'm telling you the things missed most often, on the majority of these, I have a webinar that goes with each one of these where you can go in and get more in-depth information. In the option part, remember you have to have a consideration for there to be an option. An option is usually for a limited amount of time. Also, don't forget, they're going to call them optionor and optionee. Optionor, in the example of buyer and seller, is the seller. Optionee, the buyer. Void and voidable, huge problems on the test. Void just doesn't meet one of the elements of a valid contract. We found out that the buyer had been declared mentally insane when she entered into that contract to purchase the property. That doesn't meet the competent, or you may have heard it, capable parties part that has to be there. So it's void, it's gone away, it is no more. No longer a contract. Voidable meets all of the elements majority of the time. It's the situation. It's the situation. Oh, thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate your kind words. They'll use the example of a minor. So if a minor enters into a contract, you're supposed to be 18 or older, but if a minor enters into a contract to purchase or sell something in real estate, it's voidable unless they use the words married, emancipated, or actively serving in the military. In those cases, the law treats them like they're 18 or older, so it will be valid. Now, this is for California only. No other state but California. California, I need you to listen to me on this part. This is just for you. In your state, you have your own law on this. You're the only ones. In California, if a minor enters into a contract to purchase some type of real estate or sell some type of real estate, it's void. You have your own law on that. You have your own law. You also have those exceptions to it: married, actively serving in the military, emancipated. In those, it's going to be treated as valid. But that was for California only. The rest of you, if the minor enters into a real estate contract, it's going to be voidable. Unenforceable just means typically it's not in writing. Statute of fraud says everything must be in writing to be enforceable in a court of law. The only exception for the majority of your states is a lease for less than a year. So if you had a contract that was not in writing, it would be unenforceable. Yes, Rhonda, a vendor and vendee would be like a contract for deed, or they may call it a land contract. It could be called, or they may also call it an installment contract. And they will refer to buyer and seller as vendor and vendee in that. Jorge, what oral agreements are enforceable? In most states, and you can let me know what state you're in most states, it's a lease for a year or less. Termination of contract, the property was destroyed. Be careful with this part. It gets confused regularly. If the principal passes away and you are in the sales contract, their heirs can carry out and conclude. So their heirs can carry out and conclude the transaction. So it doesn't terminate it. The heirs can carry out and conclude it. If you got the same question under agency, then in agency, then if the principal dies, it is going to terminate the agency agreement. So know the distinction of that. How do I know which topic it's coming from? In most of my webinars, I have a vocabulary list that we do per topic, and that will help you know how to categorize everything. Also, the broker passed away, there was mutual agreement, rescission, that would terminate the contract, or a legality such as bankruptcy or foreclosure. All right. So we've gotten through 7 of the topics, and I will do another webinar on this, and we'll go through the other topics so you can see the other things that I find the students are missing on the exam. I hope this was helpful for you. Um, Again, it's based off of me sitting here working with you amazing students every single day and keeping a list of what do they miss most on that exam. If I can help you through signing up for a tutoring session, you know you can sign up at prepagent.com. If you've taken the test before, I will take your score sheet, I'll evaluate it, I'll put a study plan together for you. We talk about test anxiety, if that's applicable to the student. Sometimes I have a student who's never taken the test, so I'm going to create a study plan for you so that you will have a very concise way to learn the information. Well, it was great being here with you today. I've not been here the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, our internet was down. Last week, I served on the Professional Standards Committee for Texas Realtors, so I had a commitment with Texas Realtors that day on the committee that I serve on. So the incredibly amazing Joe filled in. I knew you would love to get to see him. He does such a great job. Thank you for giving me the honor of teaching you. I really appreciate it. You're such great students, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day. Bye, everyone.